Hey there, horror fan. Ready for another batch of bone-chilling stories? Let's dive in. Quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it keeps the nightmares coming. Every story you hear is pulled from real sources. Names altered, but the events, 100% real. Buckle up. We're starting now. The ocean is vast, dark, unforgiving. For centuries, sailors have relied on lighthouses to guide them through the storms. These structures are symbols of safety, a beam of light in the endless night. But what happens when the light goes out? What happens when the men who tend the flame simply vanish? In December of 1900, on a remote cluster of rocks in the North Atlantic, a mystery began that remains unsolved to this day. 3 men entered a lighthouse. None of them ever left. No bodies were found, no signs of struggle. Just an empty room, a stopped clock, and a logbook filled with strange entries. This is the story of the Flannan Isles, a place where the wind howls like a living thing, where the waves crash higher than the cliffs, and where 3 keepers walked into the darkness and were never seen again. Some say it was a rogue wave. Some say it was madness. Others say something else came out of the sea that night, something that wanted the light for itself. The setting. The Flannan Isles are located off the west coast of Scotland. 7 small islands, barren, rocky, surrounded by some of the most dangerous waters in the world. In 1899, a lighthouse was built on the largest island. It was automated by oil lamps, tended by men who lived in isolation for weeks at a time. In December 1900, 3 men were assigned to the station. James Ducat, the principal keeper, experienced, serious. Thomas Marshall, the second keeper, strong, reliable. And Donald MacArthur, the assistant, a younger man, known to be anxious. They arrived on December 15th. They were scheduled to be relieved on December 29th. The journey to the island was rough. The supply ship struggled against the wind. When they dropped the men off, the captain noted that the weather was turning. A storm was coming. A big one. He wished them luck. He told them to keep the lamp lit, no matter what. For the first week, everything was normal. The ship passed by on schedule. The men waved from the gallery. The light shone bright. But on the second pass, something was wrong. The light was out. It was December 26th. Christmas Day had passed. The storm had been raging for days. Waves were hitting the top of the cliff, 120 feet above the sea. The supply ship tried to signal. No answer. They tried to approach. The waves were too high. They had to turn back. The supervisor on the mainland grew concerned. He sent a replacement team. They arrived on December 29th. The day the keepers were supposed to be relieved. The sea was calmer. The sky was grey. The island was silent. The replacement keeper, Joseph Moore, went ashore alone. He climbed the steep path to the lighthouse. He expected to see his friends waiting. He expected to smell cooking food. He expected to hear the clock ticking in the tower. But there was only silence. He knocked on the door. No answer. He opened it. It was unlocked. He stepped inside. The fire was cold. The clock had stopped. The chairs were overturned. But there was no sign of the men, no coats, no boots, just emptiness. He called their names. His voice echoed in the stone walls. No reply. He climbed the stairs to the lamp room. The lamp was clean. The fuel was full. But the keepers were gone. He ran back to the ship. He told the captain. A search party was formed immediately. They searched the island, every cave, every cliff, every crevice. They found nothing. No bodies, no footprints leading to the water. Just 3 oilskin coats left behind. 1 hanging on a hook, 2 on the floor. It was as if they had walked out into the storm without protection, in the middle of winter, on a rock surrounded by deadly waves. The logbook was found on the table. It was the only clue. But the entries in the final days did not make sense. They spoke of fear, of sounds, of a man crying in the wind. Entries that a seasoned keeper would never write. What happened on that island? Did they fall? Did they flee? Or did something take them? The official report said they were swept away by a rogue wave, but the evidence did not match. The coats were inside. Men do not leave their coats behind when facing a storm. And the box where the supplies were kept was locked. Something happened inside those walls. Something that made 3 experienced men leave their post, leave their safety, and walk into the dark. To understand what happened, we must look at the logbook, the words written by the men in their final days, words that describe a fear that cannot be explained by wind or water, words that suggest they were not alone on the island. Part 2. The logbook and the lies. The only clue left behind was the logbook. It lay open on the kitchen table. Dust settled on the pages. The ink was dry. But the words written inside told a story that did not match the men who wrote them. These were experienced keepers, men of the sea, men who knew storms, men who did not frighten easily. Yet the entries in those final days spoke of terror. The first strange entry was dated December 12th, 3 days before they vanished. Thomas Marshall wrote that the winds were severe. He said the winds were like nothing he had ever seen in 20 years of service. He wrote that the storm was not outside. He wrote that the storm was inside the tower. He said the men were crying, grown men, reduced to tears by the sound of the wind. On December 13th, the entries became more fragmented. James Duckett wrote that the assistant, Donald MacArthur, was praying. He said MacArthur was on his knees, begging for forgiveness, but there was no one to forgive them. They were alone on a rock in the middle of the ocean. Who were they praying to? And what did they feel guilty about? On December 14th, the last entry was made. It was short. It said the storm was over. The sea was calm. The light was extinguished. And then silence. No entry for the 15th. No entry for the 16th. Nothing until the relief keeper arrived 2 weeks later. Investigators tried to make sense of the words. Some said the men were suffering from isolation psychosis. The human mind cannot handle weeks of silence, of darkness, of nothing but the sound of waves. They said the stress broke them. They said they ran out into the storm in a fit of madness. But the evidence inside the lighthouse did not support this. The lamp was clean. It had been trimmed. The fuel tanks were full. The brass was polished. These are not the actions of men in a panic. These are the actions of men doing their duty, right up until the end. The clock in the kitchen had stopped. It was a heavy mechanical clock. It did not wind down. It was halted abruptly, as if time itself had paused. The chairs were overturned, not knocked over in a fight, but pushed aside, as if the men had stood up quickly, in unison. And then there were the coats. 3 oilskin coats. Heavy waterproof gear, essential for survival in a winter storm. 1 was hanging on a hook. 2 were lying on the floor. They did not take their coats. If they went outside, they walked into a freezing gale with only their wool shirts. That is not madness. That is suicide. And these men were not suicidal. They had families. They had plans. They had lives waiting for them on the mainland. The supervisor who led the investigation, Robert Muirhead, was a friend of the keepers. He knew them. He knew their habits. He said the scene did not make sense. He said men do not leave a lit lamp. Men do not leave a locked supply box. Men do not leave without their coats. He proposed a theory. He said a massive wave struck the island, a rogue wave, higher than the cliff. It swept the men away while they were securing the equipment. It was a tragic accident. The sea took them. The official report accepted this explanation. The families were told the men were heroes, taken by the ocean while doing their duty. But there were problems with this theory. The lighthouse was built high above the water, 120 feet. Waves do not climb that high, not even in a storm. The railings were intact. There was no damage to the exterior of the tower, no signs of impact. If a wave had hit, it would have left marks. It would have broken windows. It would have damaged the gallery. Nothing was broken. Nothing was damaged, except the men. They were simply gone. Another theory emerged from the locals. The fishermen who sailed those waters. They said the Flannan Isles were not always empty. They said there were stories of old, stories of spirits, stories of things that lived in the deep water. They said the keepers had disturbed something. They said the light was not just for ships. It was a barrier. And when the light went out, the barrier fell. Some said they saw a strange vessel near the islands around that time. A ship that did not fly a flag. A ship that did not respond to signals. Some said it was a submarine. Some said it was something else. Something that took the men, not killed them, taken. The families never accepted the wave theory. They knew their husbands. They knew their fathers. They knew they would not walk into a storm without coats. They knew they would not leave the lamp unattended. They knew something else happened. Years later, divers explored the waters around the island. They looked for bodies. They looked for gear. They found nothing. The ocean kept its secret. The lighthouse was automated soon after. No humans were needed. The light continued to shine. But the keepers were never replaced. The mystery spread. It became a legend. Songs were written. Books were published. The Flannan Isles became known as the Isle of Secrets, a place where men vanish, a place where the rules of reality bend. But legends grow over time. Facts get lost. To understand the truth, we must look at what happened after the investigation closed. We must look at the people who stayed away, the ships that changed their course, the keepers who refused to work there. Because even after the official report was filed, even after the families were paid, even after the world moved on, the light remained cursed. Sailors reported seeing figures on the gallery, figures that waved, figures that begged for help. But when the ships approached, the figures vanished. The light remained, but the men did not. Was it grief? Was it hallucination? Or was it a signal? A signal from somewhere beyond the veil. A signal that the men were not dead, but trapped. The investigation closed. The files were sealed. But the questions remained. Why did the logbook speak of crying? Why did the clock stop? Why were the coats left behind? And most importantly, if the sea took them, why did the sea not give them back? The ocean gives up its dead. Eventually, waves bring things to shore. Bodies, debris, wood, metal. But nothing from the Flannan Isles ever washed up. Not a button, not a boot, not a bone. It was as if they were erased. The official story says it was an accident. The locals say it was something else. But there is one more detail. One more piece of evidence that was never released to the public. A detail that suggests the men knew what was coming. A detail that suggests they did not leave the lighthouse voluntarily. They were called, and they answered. Part 3. The Fourth Man and the Eternal Silence. The investigation closed. The files were sealed. But rumors persisted among the sailors and the locals. There was one detail that never made it into the official report. A detail whispered in the ports of Scotland. A detail that changes everything. When the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, first approached the lighthouse, he claimed he saw something. He said he saw 4 figures on the gallery. Not 3. 4. He said one of them was wearing a strange coat, a coat that did not belong to any of the keepers. He said the figure waved, but when he blinked, the figure was gone. Others claimed that a foreign ship was seen near the islands during the storm, a ship with no flag, a ship that did not answer radio calls. Some said it was a spy vessel. Some said it was a smuggler, but others said it was something else, something that does not appear on maps. If a fourth man was on the island, who was he? Did he come from the sea? Did he come from the sky? Or did he come from somewhere else entirely? The keepers did not fight him. They did not lock the door. They left with him, voluntarily, or perhaps they were compelled, called by a voice they could not ignore. The logbook spoke of crying, of praying, of fear. These are not the actions of men fighting a storm. These are the actions of men facing something beyond understanding, something that made them leave their duty, leave their safety, and walk into the dark. The aftermath. The lighthouse was repaired, the lamp was lit again, but the station was never quite the same. New keepers were assigned, but they did not stay long. They reported strange sounds, knocking on the door when no ship was due, voices in the wind, shadows moving where no light should cast them. Within a few years, the decision was made. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse would be automated. No more human keepers. No more men to vanish. The light would burn alone, a silent sentinel watching over the deadly waves. The ocean continued to churn. The storms continued to rage, but the mystery remained. Over the decades, divers searched the waters. They found shipwrecks. They found debris, but they never found the keepers. Not a bone, not a button, not a trace. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. And now, a little theories. So what happened on December 15th, 1900? There are many theories, each one stranger than the last. The first theory is the rogue wave, a massive wall of water that swept the men away. It is the official explanation. But it does not explain the coats. It does not explain the locked box. It does not explain the logbook entries. The second theory is madness, isolation psychosis, the mind breaking under the pressure of silence. But experienced keepers do not break so easily. They were trained for this. They were selected for their stability. And why did all three break at the exact same moment? The third theory is espionage. Spies from a foreign nation. They killed the keepers and disposed of the bodies. But there was no blood, no signs of struggle. And why leave the lamp running? The fourth theory is the supernatural. Some say the Flannan Isles are a thin place, a place where the veil between worlds is weak. They say the keepers were taken by spirits, by beings from the deep, by something that wanted the light for itself. There is even a theory about time. Some say the men did not die. They slipped. They walked into a different time, a different reality, and they are still there, walking the gallery, waiting for a ship that will never come. The conclusion: we may never know the truth. The ocean keeps its secrets well. It hides things in the deep, in the dark, where the light cannot reach. But the story of the Flannan Isles serves as a warning, a reminder that we are not masters of this world. We build our lights, we draw our maps, we name our lands. But nature is older than us, stronger than us, and sometimes it is hungry. The next time you see a lighthouse beam cutting through the night, remember the keepers of Flannan. Remember the coats left on the floor. Remember the clock that stopped. Remember the logbook that spoke of fear. They were three men. They had names. They had families. They had lives. And then they were gone, erased by the wind, swallowed by the sea. The light still shines on the Flannan Isles. It flashes once every few seconds. A rhythm of warning, a rhythm of loss. Some sailors say that if you listen closely during a storm, you can hear something else beneath the sound of the horn. You can hear voices calling, begging, asking to come home. But the sea does not give back what it takes. The light burns on, the waves crash, and the mystery remains. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. And remember, not every light is a guide. Some lights are a warning. Keep to the shore, keep to the land, and never answer when the ocean calls your name. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you don't mind. We don't have many subscribers yet, but I hope we can fix that. I'm working really hard for you. Please let me know what we can improve in the comments. I appreciate the criticism.